It's time for This Week in WordPress, episode number 175, recorded on Monday the 23rd of August 2021. This episode entitled, Should I Get a Standing Desk? This week, I'm joined by Michelle Frechette and Tim Nash as we talk about the WordPress news. My regular co-host, Paul Lacey, he's having a bit of a break, but he'll be joining us next week. And so the news that we talk about this time around is a discussion about whether or not WordPress is getting harder and harder to work with, especially if you're somebody new to the platform. There's also been a bit of controversy about some plugins being rejected from the WordPress.org repository because they start with the prefix WP. What does all that mean? Also, Automattic is now valued at a staggering $7.5 billion. I've no idea how that happened, but we talk about that. We also get into the idea that the hackers, well, they're getting smarter and smarter. And what does this mean for us? How is it that they're able to hide their code? WordFence has an article this week. We also discuss the fact that the Page Builder Summit is coming around again. They need some sponsors. So do WordCamp US. Actually, they need speakers. And finally, we talk about whether or not I should get a standing desk. It's all coming up next on This Week in WordPress. This Week in WordPress was brought to you by A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time? The new A/B Split Test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is that it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder and the WordPress block editor. Go check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Hello. How are you doing? That's the wrong screen. That's a good start, isn't it? Let's build off and put the things that matter on the screen. As always, This Week in WordPress, we come to you 2 p.m. UK time every Monday, unless I'm on holiday, which I have been recently. But we're back, and we've got two lovely guests today. We've got Tim Nash joining us from the UK, and we've got Michelle Frechette joining us from the US. Michelle is at stupid o'clock. Tim is at the same time as me.
Still stupid o'clock.
Sorry, definitely put these on at the wrong time of day. I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourselves. That would probably be the easiest thing to do because I'm trying to multitask. Paul normally does this bit, but Paul Lacey, you may have noticed there's a great big hole in the screen. Paul's had a holiday, which he's currently on, and so he's not here this week. And he normally does the introductions, so I'm gonna let Tim introduce himself first. So Tim, tell us who you are.
My name is Tim Nash. I'm a WordPress security consultant, but at the moment I'm enjoying the summer holidays with my daughter.
Nice. That's good. Thank you so much. Short and to the point. And Michelle, tell us who you are.
So I am the Director of Customer Success for GiveWP, which is now part of Liquid Web, as well as being the podcast barista over at WP Coffee Talk.
Thank you so much. When you said that, I was expecting you to say Stellar WP, but it's actually Liquid Web, is it? Which in turn is owned by Stellar. Right. How does that work?
So Liquid Web is the parent company.
Okay.
And Stellar WP is the umbrella under which all of the software sits. So if you are looking for Cadence blocks or the event calendar or Give, iThemes, that is all under the brand of Stellar WP.
Okay, thank you. That makes perfect sense now. Thanks so much. If you want to join us, then feel free to do that. The easiest way to do that is just to comment wherever you may be. If you're on Facebook, then you'll need to do an additional thing, and that is this. Go to chat.restream.io/FB, and that will enable Facebook to provide your avatar and so on. I'm really surprised that Facebook, even have this requirement. It seems like they're quite happy to share almost everything about everybody. But there you go. If you want to be de-anonymized, go to that link. If you've got any questions during this, we'll try to put up as many as we can as time goes on. But feel free to say hi and tell us where you're coming from. Looks like we've got one in already. Cameron, who's here basically every single week, which I very much appreciate. Cameron.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. Cameron's in Australia. And he says, "What have you done with Paul Lacey, and where did you hide his body?" I've hidden it in a caravan, I think, somewhere down on the south coast of the UK with his family, which is quite a nice thing to do with him. And maybe he's listening to it now. That'd be hysterical if he was listening to it now, getting told off. Okay, let's get cracking and talk about the WordPress stuff for this week, if that's all right. Just to let you know, this is our website, wpbuilds.com. You can find all of the bits and pieces over there. If you fancy keeping in touch with the stuff that we produce, fill in that little email form there, and we'll send you a newsletter just to tell you about the 2 bits of content that we produce each week. But moving right along, we are going to first of all talk about WordPress and its kind of future, if you like, because there was a few bits and pieces that went back and forth. It was a bit like tennis over the last week or so. Primarily, kind of Justin Tadlock was talking in the context of Matthias Ventura, and the conversation kind of was around the fact that these days, if you are a new person to WordPress, it may be significantly more difficult for you to actually get things done. We're not talking about if you just sort of log in and you point, click, drag, and so on, like you might do with a page builder. But if you want to do things, for example, like, I don't know, building blocks or extending WordPress and so on, then that might be a little bit more difficult. I'm really out of touch with all of this in terms of actually building stuff and client websites and all of that kind of stuff, because I've obviously moved into kind of content creation a little bit more these days. I'm just curious as to which side of the fence you fall on. Maybe that you sit on the fence and think it's as easy as it ever was. Maybe with Gutenberg's requirements for knowledge of React and JavaScript and all of that kind of stuff, you think it's more difficult. So let's kick off with Tim, if he's got a response to this.
So I think on the whole, I'm slightly sitting on the fence, but I'll explain why. First of all, Gutenberg has made being a WordPress front-end developer, I think, significantly harder, while at the same time, all the new bits with like things like theme JSON files and all the new theme stuff that's coming on board soon will make your lives easier. So you're in a state at the moment where things are both incredibly hard and getting easier. But as a general WordPress developer, just getting started now is confusing. 5 years ago, if you wanted to be a WordPress developer, your core skill was PHP. And then HTML and CSS was really useful. JavaScript, as long as it was pretty much, we lived in a world of jQuery and most people could hack their way around it. Now, you really do have to have a good understanding of JavaScript to do things well. You can still hack around with PHP and do quite well, but if you want to do stuff with Gutenberg, you can use things like ACF blocks that will help you get some way still using your PHP skills, but those skills have had to adopt to a JavaScript world. And unfortunately, the JavaScript world is not a pleasant one to work in for many people. It is confusing. So you only have to say, how do I create a block? And someone's going to say, oh, what you need to do is you npm this. And
yeah,
okay, we have to go back 10 steps to what is npm. The npm's a no package. Okay, and what's webpack, and how does this what's gulp, and where's grunt here, and why do I have 4 package managers to do just one thing? So it all gets really confusing, and it's obviously moving at a really fast pace, which is particularly galling to the PHP developers who have been desperately trying to get WordPress to move at a faster pace on the PHP side and get told, oh no, backwards compatibility. You can't have that. You can't have Composer for package management. Happily can have 4 other package managers for JavaScript, but you can't have 1 for PHP. So you get this sort of rub against these sort of conflicting views. On the plus side, we've got much better documentation and some really clever people who know what they're doing and are teaching, which is a good thing, which is something we didn't have before. So it is possible to learn this stuff. But yeah, if you're coming as an existing developer in a small agency, I can totally sympathize and understand why you're frustrated as anything. As a complete newbie, it might actually be a better experience. But I'm not sure I would, if someone was a complete newbie developer, I'm not sure I would recommend WordPress as their sort of way to do their training, if you like, anymore. Whereas I might have done a few years ago. I don't think I would now. I'd say come to WordPress once you've been somewhere else, which I think is a bit of a sad, but I think that will get them the prerequisite skills they'll then need to use WordPress.
Yeah, it's curious. Some of the things that you said, obviously, are reflected in this article, and some of the other things I hadn't really given any thought to the not the documentation. You said like tutorials and what have you. That's true. Now that we've got LMSs and all of that kind of stuff built into WordPress, there's a lot of people. Joe Casabona was on the podcast recently, and he's got a little course which he sells online. And there's various other people with YouTube channels, and they're really interested. You've got people like Anne McCarthy who are making great efforts to put out content to get people involved in the project and so on. Yeah, so I hadn't really thought about that side. And interestingly, in this article, they make the point that even though the documentation is probably better than it was, they still feel that there's a lot of catching up to do, and making it look nice is also part of the thing, putting in screenshots that are appropriate. But keeping up with that kind of stuff is a formidable task, I would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
Anything on your side? What do you reckon, Michelle?
So first of all, I'm friends with Chris, and he had no idea that tweet and that post were going to blow up the way they did. He's been getting contacted by magazines and people outside of WordPress to do interviews, which he's declined. But but he seriously hit a nerve with all of that information. What's interesting is, over on the Underrepresented in Tech.com podcast, Allie and I have been talking about education, the requirements for education, the privilege that comes with education. But when you start to talk about changes like this, a background, a degree in certain kinds of development aren't necessarily going to help you here either, right? Because the pace is going so quickly. So in a way, it's the privilege is different than did you have the money to go to college or not go to college, as much as do you have the time and the effort and the energy in your life that it takes to continue to, learn all the new stuff that's being brought forward. If you don't have the time to read the great documentation, does that help you at all? All those kinds of things. So it really is interesting. It's definitely a different WordPress than I started using, almost 10 years ago. So it's everything changes. The way I like to say it is everybody was completely up in arms when Facebook changed its layout, but none of us remember what the Facebook layout was before the current one, right? So this is a little different. I understand that, coding is very much different than what does my screen look like. But the truth is, when you say things like it's changed, and I think really to speak to Tim's comment about if you're coming in as a new developer, if this is the way it's always been, then you're going to learn it this way, and you don't have the history behind it. I said the same thing about Gutenberg when it first came out. I stopped teaching WordPress because I had to learn it first. Whereas people who were coming into WordPress for the first time, it was native to them. And so for that point, they just started using it, and they didn't have as much of a learning curve as those of us who'd been using it the way we always did in the past. Yeah,
it's interesting. Cameron, just to your point there, Michelle, Cameron makes a sort of similar point. He says, someone I know pointed out that the reason React Dev is so much harder is that you can't build iteratively. It goes on to say PHP, you can just say, Echo World, hello, and it works. To output the same with React takes hours of setup, which, I guess is a good point. If you have to do a boatload of stuff before you can get anything happening, that might just put people off. It was interesting, though. There was something in here about building block plugins, and I can't be certain that I'm going to get the right point in the article, but Justin made the point that there were a few people who had found it really easy to do things, building their own blocks with the setup that they've got at the moment than they did before. They didn't regard themselves as developers, basically designers, but they were able to throw a few things together with a few hours of tutorials. And wish I could find the bit. Curiously, this article ends about this thing called the boss factor, which I had never heard of before. Reading it, the boss factor is basically as people important to the project accidentally get hit by a boss. And are we at a point now, or are we heading into a point in the near future where a few key people being hit by a boss or just getting bored and walking away or having something else to do might mean that the project stagnates and doesn't move forward? And it does feel like there are certain key people who, if they decided to do things different and have a different life away from WordPress, we could be in a bit of bother.
I thought you were going to say if they decided to get hit by a bus, and I'm really glad
That's
you didn't go
right.
there.
Yeah. Yes. No, we won't get into that. Okay. Nothing else to add to that from me. If you two are happy, we'll
Just
move on to the
one
next
thing
one.
that Michelle mentioned, which was she sort of hooked onto, which was that the doc was talking about going and looking for that documentation. One thing we have got all these extra tutorials and documentation. One thing we don't actually have though is a way for us to find that documentation easily. If you come and type in the word WordPress developer course, what you're not going to get is an up-to-date modern WordPress development course. What you're going to get is the person who did SEO 10 years ago, who's done brilliantly at their SEO and is now number one in Google for WordPress developer course, and they're raking it in with a course that is still based on something from like 10 years ago. All credit to them, because I wouldn't change it either if I was in their position. But we as a community don't have an easy way to do that, except through things like Make and Learn.WordPress. But Learn.WordPress is, like everything to do with WordPress, very inwardly focusing. So they won't link out to other people's sites. They won't link out to those other courses because they want to build out those, curate that resource themselves. So we still need to find a way of getting the information, and that's something that's really lacking. And I think that the people who said they had learnt Gutenberg in 5 hours, if they were given the right resource at the right time, and they didn't just tweet, "I hate Gutenberg, I can't make it work," and have 10 people go, "npm install," which is what you'll get if you do it.
Yeah. Hey, it's a curious question about documentation. I find writing the least interesting bit of putting this podcast together, in that, there's audio and I have to make graphics and what have you. And each time I do write some show notes, which not everybody does who does a podcast. They might write just a few words, but I sometimes write a couple of thousand to say what's in the podcast episode. And that's the least interesting bit for me, because it just turns out that I don't much like technical, especially writing. I just find I find other things to do. I'm much more likely to be distracted. On the other hand, I know, Michelle, you love putting pen to paper and writing things. What do you
I
think
write a
about the
lot.
whole? Yeah, do you enjoy technical writing? Because a lot of the
Not
stuff
at all.
no, exactly, yeah.
I would much rather write things like how to do fundraising. I like to write that for the Big Orange Heart blog. Anything like that. I write about business, any of those kinds of things. But technical writing, documentation, it's very dull to me.
Yeah.
Very much needed, of course, but also very dull.
Well, I kind of feel that that's probably going to always be the case. A lot of the people involved in the project are doing important things like writing the code or, being involved in the community or what have you. It feels that it is a stretch to make the documentation keep up with everything, just because there's my experience is that most people do not enjoy writing technical documentation as much as a whole battery of other things. So I think the documentation side of things is always going to be a bit of a difficult one to keep up.
I noticed that Cameron hasn't made a note about how much he enjoys documentation either.
Yeah, exactly. And if Cameron hasn't said it, then it doesn't happen. Yeah. Straw poll. What does Cameron think? Okay, let's move on, because this is a bit of a storm in a teacup piece that we had this week. This came from two places. It originally appears, I don't know if it originally came here, Coy Wolf, the website. There'll be a link in the show notes when this is published tomorrow, but I'm going to focus on the one written by Sarah Gooding over at WP Tavern. So this is really curious, and it kind of got me all hot under the collar for a little while until I calmed down and thought about it some more. But during the last week or so, there was a plugin author, and forgive me, the only thing I've got here is the Twitter handle Youngblood Joe, and he put a plugin into the review process, and the plugin was called WP something, and I forget what it was called. Maybe somebody can tell me in a sec. And it was turned down because of what felt like trademark problem of having the preface of WP something. And obviously, as soon as I read this, without any more thought or what have you, I suddenly think, well, I've got WP built. It's not a plugin, but is that contravening some kind of thing that's written down? I'm not allowed to say WP, because my expectation was WP was always the poor man's version of saying WordPress. We're not allowed to say WordPress because that really is in law, as far as I know. And so we all go WP instead. And I just thought, oh no, please don't say that WP is now being inspected in this same way. So anyway, his plugin was booted out of the repository, and he was told, no, that's not allowed. Go and find another name or what have you. And this is the way the sort of debate started to happen. It felt like a trademark thing, and people were getting all annoyed. Mika Epstein said, nope, nothing to do. We're just trying to make things tidy and keep things so that it's really obvious. Really, if you're in the WordPress plugin space, I think the argument would go something like this. Find a name that's got nothing to do with a handle in WP. So, if you're an SEO plugin, call yourself the SEO plugin or something like that. Don't have WP. Then, of course, you get people going, yeah, but there's WP Rocket and there's WP this plugin and WP that plugin, and they were allowed to do it. Why can't I? And so it goes on. Politics, Twitter feeds go crazy. And what do you think? Let's start with Michelle on this one.
Well, like you, the first thing I thought was, I saw the first blush without doing a deeper dive and was like, oh my gosh, we can't use WP. I'm going to have to rename my podcast.
Yeah, exactly me. Yeah, perfect.
I'm like, Coffee Talk isn't the same as WP Coffee Talk.
No.
But then when I read it a little bit further, I actually thought a lot of what they say makes sense. So from a marketing standpoint, right? So we think that putting the WP in front of things is going to help us be found. It's going to help us. But the truth is, if you can really differentiate yourself without relying on the WordPress part of it, then you've probably got a better. It doesn't say WP SEO. It says Yoast. Everybody knows what Yoast is, right? We use give WP with the WP, but it's actually just give. But we put the WP on there just for marketing. It's not actually in the code. So if you can, divorce yourself of the WP where you need to, you can still, of course, market yourself as a WordPress plugin.
Yeah. Okay.
And you don't have to rename your podcast.
No. Yeah, I really was thinking that's both of us. But
I thought of myself first, of course, but then I thought of you too.
What do you think about though the fact that there are players obviously in there who've got underneath the wire before and really to me, go on.
Yeah, anything, whenever there's change, there's going to be things that are grandfathered, right? So they're not going to make you go back over how many plugins are in the repo now, right? And how many of them have WP hyphen in them. To change all of that would be a complete and utter nightmare. And so you do grandfather things, you make changes going forward. And so, to the new people, it feels horrible because, well, they got to, I don't. But, life isn't about fair, right? There's equity, there's justice, there's equality. But when you make changes, you move forward. It used to be that, you couldn't drive your horse on a Sunday or something like that. And we have automobiles now. The laws change, right? And so you just kind of have to say, well, they used to be able to do it, right? But we have automobiles. You can't ride your horse down the middle of Main Street without causing an accident now. So
wait, can't you?
I was going to say, this is not a law I've ever fallen foul of. Yeah.
But also, you haven't been to the UK. Now, we ride our horses wherever we like. We can throw our goats and our sheep across bridges in London quite happily.
Do you know, we could get into such an interesting conversation about the quirky laws that we have in the UK. Everybody's got these apocryphal stories of these peculiar laws. I'm sure it's the same in the United States.
We call them blue laws here. I don't know why, but they're called blue laws. But if you took your horse down, a motorway that was 55 miles per hour or greater, that's a problem, right? So you can't take your horse down the middle of maybe Main Street's fine because it's slow, but you wouldn't ride a horse down the Autobahn. So, but once upon a time, there were no vehicles, and riding, that stretch of what turned into the Autobahn was a horse path. So things change.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Tim.
Well, something that Michelle said there was, you think about Yoast and how Yoast is branded, and it's Yoast SEO. Of course, if you go and actually look at their slug is actually WordPress -SEO.
Is it?
There you go.
And they are the #1 plugin for WordPress SEO in terms of downloads. Now, I wonder how that happened. Anyway, is it?
Yeah.
So you can understand why people might be a bit narked. Also, when when it started off, it was all of the whole trademark thing was very much they're blocking the trademarks, and the initial response is no, we're not. It's like, but you are. I was like, no, it's got nothing to do with trademarks. What on earth makes you think it's about trademarks? It's like, because the array that this protection is is called trademarks _ exceptions equals array. So it's literally, they're using the code for trademark preventions to stop this. So of course everybody assumed the worst. And I'll be honest, the argument is specifically that people who put WP in front are later then going to change it to WordPress. And it's like, but can they not just not put it in front and then later change it to WordPress? How does that fix the? So it does feel like it's a solution to a problem that I didn't even realize they had, but clearly there's enough of a problem that they've taken this action. So a problem that nobody knew they had, and it doesn't fix that problem. So I'm not quite sure. Josepha says in that piece, I think, that it's an experiment. I imagine it's an experiment that's going to be quietly withdrawn. I think it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. Enough people are complaining about the fact that it doesn't make sense in terms of how people find and look for plugins. I think an example of WP SMTP is used there. What would you do? Create a plugin called SMTP. Well, now you've got two plugins called SMTP. So the WP is a good way of differentiating. If I've got my service, let's say I'm Facebook, I might want a WP Facebook to differentiate my WordPress plugin from my Joomla Facebook plugin. So I might have, I don't know, JL. I don't know how they prefix Joomla. JL.Facebook hyphen Facebook. So I can sort of, I don't really see the point. I think somebody put it in, thought it was a good idea. Someone found out, everybody got shouty. Now some lines have been drawn. People have come up with a somewhat of a backstory to fix it, because it was, by everybody's admission, this was just thrown up in a meeting and it was thrown in a quick code commit and then it was gone. We've all done that. We've all had that scenario, and you normally have two choices. You roll it back or you stick to your guns, and then you see what happens, and it happens over and over again. They'll back down eventually.
I'm curious because if I do a search in Google, so let's say, for example, that it was Tim Nash that I was looking for. Quite likely, there's not that many Tim Nashes because
there are lots.
Oh, okay. So
and I hate the Wolves. There's a guy in Wolverhampton who is a sports journalist, and we don't get on.
Okay, that's great. So if I search for Tim Nash on Google, the quickest way that I'm going to find this, he said, pointing, this Tim Nash, is by putting WP in the search results. So this is what I do for everybody that I want to track down a Twitter handle for. I might type in Michelle Frechette space WP, Tim Nash space WP, and that is a solid way of finding somebody in the WordPress space, which tells me that Google clearly associate WP inextricably with WordPress. And also, if you're not allowed to use WordPress and you've got a plugin like an SMTP plugin, and you're now sort of, we'll give it a jazzy name, call it something unique, like, I don't know, just a made-up name. That's really difficult. You're going to have a lot of work to get traction and to make people understand what it is. But if you just call it ordinary plugin name prefaced with WP, you've really cut out all the hard work of making people understand what it is. So WP SMTP, WP Forms, WP whatever, it just makes life really easy. And I just don't quite get why this should be out of bounds, because it's
Can
not.
you still not call it that though? Right, you can still call it that. It's just it's talking about code. It's not talking about what your branding and how you're using the letters WP. They haven't told us we can't give WP.
Correct.
We are. It's just.
But I guess my fear, and this is kind of where the conversation went. Lots of people were sort of saying, is this in fact a precursor to people saying, well, we'd rather you didn't use WP, and of course everybody came out and said, no, that's not what's going on. But I was just curious that putting WP in the slug name that mirrors exactly what your plugin is called. And it makes
it begs the question, is it WP drama or WP dash drama now?
Definitely dash drama. Yeah, that's right. WP storm -in-a- teacup. But nice. It's good to have these little dramas occasionally. It's nice to keep everybody's toes.
There's always little dramas.
Anyway, the article for this is on WP Tavern. You can see it here. It's called WordPress.org Experiments with Rejecting Plugin Submissions with WP Prefix. And then there's some more words, but that's all you need to probably Google. Okay. Right, if we're done with that one, that was the article that it came with, so we don't need to go into this. Oh boy, this is a piece of that I literally was unable to read because I'm not clever enough. I don't understand economics at all. I am very much, how much money is in my pocket and what's the balance in my bank account? That's kind of all I need to know. I don't have clever portfolios stacked up here. I don't understand what financial institutions do and how they squirrel away money and how you get seed money and where it's spent and how you can offset it against this, that, and the other thing. All of those things I just made up. They're probably not even real. And this, basically what came out of this is that Automattic in February, they've kept it really quiet for reasons that I didn't quite understand. They had a primary funding round of a jaw-dropping amount of money, $288 million. I think I read these numbers so often now that it kind of feels, it's $288 million. But then I thought, $288 million, what do you do with $288 million? And you're talking like hospitals and that kind of thing, aren't you? $288 million from a bunch of companies that I know nothing about. BlackRock, Wellington, Schonfeld, the Alta Park. Probably you all know exactly who these people are. But they've invested a bunch of money into Automattic. And the big takeaway for me was that this number here is now the valuation of Automattic. And for those of you that are listening to it, that number is, wait for it, $7.5 billion, which is just so much money. And then the article goes into all of the clever financial things that happened and why it's, why they've been buying things and what have you. But really, that was the piece. $7.5 billion. I don't even know what that could buy. I don't know what that actually looks like, but
pretty sure you could build your own spaceship and do a trip around the world like Jeff Bezos did.
Yeah, that would honestly be the most peculiar thing to see Matt Mullenweg launch a space company. There's something about that which doesn't fit. I don't know, but what do you make of this? What do you make of all this money and all of these people investing in Automattic? I mean, everybody constantly says, it's maturation. It's the way it is. I just don't even get it. I just don't get the numbers. I don't get how you get this big.
Well, with the market share that WordPress has on the internet right now, it's not surprising to see money being poured in that direction, because it's not a sinking ship. It's definitely riding the tides very, very well, and so that's where money goes, right? Because you want to see your money grow itself, and so you want to put it in something that's doing very well. I have an MBA, but my MBA is in marketing, and I took the one finance class that I had to have to graduate. So that's pretty much where my my conversation ends.
It wasn't in macroeconomics then.
It was not in macro, micro, or any other kind of economics. I took one econ class and one finance class and a lot of marketing and e-commerce classes. But when e-commerce was still, this was 2000 and 2001. So this is when it still cost, $100 to buy a URL, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see how much money is sitting in Automattic. It's more interesting to think about why. What is the plan with over $7 billion in a company that's watching the budget line so carefully of WordCamps, for example? And, no, your WordCamp is about $300 over budget. What are you going to drop so that you come in at budget? Well, I don't know, just pull 300 out of that $7.6 billion. Why don't you? And we'll call it even. They could maybe send some money over to Big Orange Heart, and we wouldn't have to worry about the fundraising like we do.
I feel a gauntlet has just been thrown down, and that's interesting.
I think
one of the girl who has the barista behind her making her coffee in the morning.
I think it's worth remembering that they don't actually have $7.5 billion.
Correct.
Dollars. Some hypothetical scenario has occurred, which how you value intangible things on the internet is always been causing these giant valuations. If you own a steel production facility, you have the amount of steel you can put out over a period of time. Times that by 12.
Yeah.
You have a valuation.
Even if we just look at the 288 million, there's still enough to make sure that WordCamps happen in a very nice way.
One of the things in the article I did find interesting was that the idea of buyback shares.
Yeah, I didn't get this either.
So this is basically when you join Automattic and you've been there for a while, they let you buy some shares.
Right. So
Or
if
give
you're
you shares.
if you're an employee and you've put some time in, you can purchase shares back. Okay.
Well, no, you're given shares, or you can
Mhm.
buy extra shares because they're a private company, and I don't really entirely know how the American system works because it's stupidly complicated everywhere in the world. And because they're a private company, they don't have to at any point pay you for those shares. So they can just you can have shares, and don't even have to give you dividends from them. So what it seems that they've done is this year they've gone to all the people who might have older shares, who might have left the company, and even some of the original people whose shares are now worth quite a lot of money have gone, hey, would you like an opportunity for us to buy them back? Which means they can then hold on to those shares, which means that the automaticians themselves and Automattic and Matt still have this quite large pot of shares, even though they're getting in all this extra investment. So my understanding, and I am not an economist, is that he's done good. He's doing good. They're doing good. But the big thing is that the ex-employees have also done good out of this, where it's so normal for a company when you leave that they've issued you with what is effectively junk shares that are only tangible while you're in the company, or they force you to sell them at a pittance rate so they were totally worthless. So it seems like that hasn't happened with Automattic, and actually there are people who got a little bit of a payout out of this, and that's got to be a good thing because they can give to Big Orange Heart. I was going to say WP&L.
Yeah, WP&L.
Big Orange
Wearing
Heart.
the t-shirt.
My favorite crazy theory, though, is that we should be watching for Automattic to be purchasing OnlyFans any minute now.
Okay, so wait a minute, right? So I've seen this word so many times over the last, let's say, week or so, maybe more. What even is that?
OnlyFans?
Yeah.
I've never actually logged in, but Tim looks like he knows. So let's.
Oh.
Okay.
Just kidding, Tim.
No, but it's like,
are we going down a rabbit hole here?
We're going down a scary rabbit hole. You do not wish to go.
Okay, the brief elevator.
Okay, the brief elevator.
It's pay for content, yeah.
It's pay for content from a farm in West Sussex. So it's founded in West Sussex in the UK. It is basically a pay, like Patreon, only they allowed adult content.
Oh.
And you know what? They got really big really quickly because it's really unusual for a site like that to offer adult content. Whatever your feelings towards safe space, sex work, it provided that space. And so people jumped on it, and lots of independent people jumped on it. So individual workers, rather than it being big companies and porn production companies. The problem is there's a reason no one does this, because MasterCard and Visa came along and went, hi.
I don't think so.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
You might be consenting, but we're not consenting to this.
We're not consenting.
We're not in this consenting mode. And so they've basically said, we're yanking your ability to take payments. So OnlyFans, which does have non-adult content, supposedly.
Absolutely. That's what I've heard.
Someone was talking about toenails on TV this morning.
No, we're not. No, that's a different rabbit hole. We're not doing that.
But anyway, but they basically said, oh no, we're going to have no explicit adult content, which it's like 99.999% of their content.
It's a bit like WordPress.com saying we're not allowing the letter P in any publication now. It's just like, okay, there's the end of your business. All right.
Yeah, but I think Michelle was alluding to Tumblr when she made the reference.
Yes.
Was.
Oh, that's it. That's really interesting. Just getting back to this article, one of the things which keeps cropping up is Matt's bullishness about WooCommerce. I think he really does feel that the valuation of Automattic is going to go through the roof at some point in the near future, because he keeps saying that he thinks it's working at about 1% of what it could do, and if it becomes the default platform for e-commerce throughout the known universe, then obviously 7.5 billion would seem like a small amount of money. I just don't understand what you do with like all of this money that's being invested. I guess one of the things addressed in the article is that they're on a massive clip to hire people. So many people being hired, and if memory serves, I think they've got 136 people hired this year to date. So in about 8 months, they've managed to take it up to 136 extra people. And they're looking for a whole bunch of really, really senior people around head of payments, WooCommerce, VIP, and various other things. So probably this is where the money's going, as well as buying up loads of really nice things like Pocket Casts and Day One, all these lovely apps that I like to use. Let's move on, unless we've got something else. This one is definitely out of my comfort zone. I don't know about you, Michelle. This is all sort of themes and headless and what have you. And I thought, well, let's put this one in because we have somebody who actually knows how hosting works. To me, hosting is something. Well, I used to run my own server, but it was really straightforward to do. But usually hosting involves exchanging money for a username and a password and then just praying that it all works. And yeah, Tim's sort of shrugging. Yeah, I guess maybe that's how it works. Tim, on the other hand, has a deep and rich heritage being on the technical side of hosting. And this article, which I should probably put on the screen, otherwise nobody's going to know what I'm on about. It's another WP Tavern article. New boilerplate speeds up building nearly headless WordPress themes. First of all, Tim, what's the did you, if you managed to read this one, clarify for us what's the difference between headless and nearly headless? And don't say Nick, because that's not honest.
Well, should we start with what is headless? Because I think that might get us somewhere.
Let's go there.
So a headless or decoupled theme is where the theme itself is not making direct calls to WordPress. Instead, it makes API requests, either using the REST API or GraphQL, the GraphQL plugin, to make. So it effectively makes requests to the server without knowing anything about what's there on the server. So it can sit on a completely separate server away from WordPress and make those calls across. Now, this is different from, say, a static site. So, for example, my own site is a static site. So if you went to my site, you could go and try and find WP admin area for all you like. But on my site, I log in on my local machine, I generate some pages, and it creates HTML, which gets automatically uploaded. With a headless scenario, it's very similar in some respects in that they've got the HTML and the JavaScript gets uploaded and can be uploaded anywhere you like. But with a headless one, there's this connection back to a back-end server somewhere that can then be running WordPress. Now, the advantage of this is that back-end server, there's far less things hitting that back-end server. So from a resource perspective, it means that your site should stay nice and fast and shouldn't fall over. From a security perspective, there are some benefits because people are hitting what is hopefully a flat HTML at the front. Though you've still got these endpoints exposed, but those endpoints are much more limited and what can be done with them. The downside to both a full static site and a headless site is that plugins don't really do anything anymore. If you imagine Gravity Forms, and it's like, yay, I put my Gravity Form up on my static site, and I submit the form, and it doesn't go anywhere. That's unfortunate. So you then have all these things and services that work together to try. So suddenly, running a static site requires you to have like 20 services working for you, and it becomes, you go from, oh yeah, this is going to be free, I can run this on, I don't know, GitHub pages, to actually it's costing me a fortune because I'm paying someone to store my forms for me and stuff. And likewise with headless, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm free, except for the fact I still have a full WordPress stack sitting over here that I have to pay for. And if you look at people, the hosting companies that are now in this space, they've gone, ha, we get to make you pay for it twice. And so you're paying, so that you effectively end up paying for two servers for these sort of setups. As for nearly headless, I believe this is what's referred to as a marketing talk.
Nice.
Basically, from what I read and understood, I haven't played with it, is that their plugins basically extend the REST API to give you more functionality. So the REST API by default, it has some very limited options in terms of what you can get in and out of it without going through a whole heap of authentication and doing OAuth and all sorts of complicated stuff. And their plugin gives you a little bit more flexibility. The problem when we start talking about giving APIs more flexibility is we end up with XML RPC. albeit in a nice, pretty version with JSON, but we'll end up back in the world of XML RPC very quickly if we're not careful. And this is where headless really sort of falls down. We're taking something that was fairly simple, and we've just added layers and layers and layers of complexity for partial gains. Now, in some scenarios, for big enterprises in particular, this might work well, especially if you can get your WordPress site, your main part of your WordPress site, sitting behind the corporate firewall. You have a proxy in the middle for just passing those requests through. It can become a very secure way of working and a way that works in most enterprise IT models. For your average person, headless WordPress is probably not the thing they need or want to go towards. And I think nearly headless is just going to be, yeah. They're selling a plugin and they're selling their plugin and thing. Well, they're not selling; they're giving it away, I think. What is nice about this is that it is using modern stuff. So instead of like jQuery, they've got Alpine.js and bits in there, but it is just a theme at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good that we had Tim on to talk about this, because I couldn't have said any of those words. Like, I don't even know. I think Tim was probably just lying to us all. Just that I've no idea.
So my 2 cents. My 2 cents on this is we need to get James Tryon to create the headless Wapuu and the nearly headless Wapuu now.
Oh, come on, that would be so funny. No, I mean, it could be quite just gory.
Just in time for Halloween. Well, it could be gory, or it could be like, the headless horseman
the
kind
big ball with his head there instead of the big blue thing.
I think it would be hysterical, actually.
Yeah, it would be. It's just a missing
I'd like to see it for Halloween.
It really does, though, seem to me like this keeps getting pushed out as a trope at the minute. Headless is the way forward and what have you. It's quite interesting to get your take on that. Also, I am interested in what you've got set up on your own. I'm guessing that you've done this, you've built it yourself, Tim. You're set up for your own personal website, or is it like a spaghetti of different services and plugins, or have you just?
I mean, for mine, actually, my website just uses. I run a copy of local on my machine. Well, actually, that bit we'll skip over because it's not quite. But for the sake of it, I have a local dev environment on my machine, which has my site on it, which is a standard WordPress site. It doesn't have pretty much no plugins on there except a couple that I've coded. And then I use JP Static, which is a plugin that by Leon Stafford.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Which just generates HTML pages, and then I have I put those HTML pages in, and I have so when I hit go, it deploys my site. When I've written something or edited some bits and pieces, it deploys my site into a folder, which is a Git folder, which I then just git commit into, and it appears on my Netlify. On a Netlify, which is a hosting server for static things.
Right. Right.
It is free.
I
don't pay a penny from my site.
You're right about that. I've got a feeling we got the name wrong. Is it WP2 Static with the number 2
Possibly.
Or something like that? Yeah.
Only he has 2 plugins, and it's the one that's not his main one.
Okay.
This one allows me to just do stuff from the command line.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting, your setup. And is there a reason why you did that? Is it just that you wanted to conjure about and fiddle and try something new, and when you'd finished it you were like, oh, I'm really happy with this? Or did you set out to make it, because that is significantly more complicated than I would like to be involved in, but obviously there are massive benefits.
It's significantly simpler than managing a WordPress website.
Nice.
Because I don't have to worry about servers,
right,
and hosting and all that jazz. Or ultimately, the things on my local machine, the Git stuff is all optional. You could have literally just, as long as you can get a WordPress site running on your local machine, it's as simple as then pressing a button and it can be deployed to whatever hosting you want. And your hosting can be, I use Netlify, Netlify,
yeah.
But
so easy to say.
You can say GitHub Pages. You could throw that to Cloudflare's new static hosting. You can put it wherever you like. So I've got a backup system with my DNS, so that even if Netlify went down, Cloudflare would just kick in, and you'd still see the site again. So
I think I think, Tim, you get this week's award for, this week's Nerd Point Awards. That's really good. That sounds
But you
amazing.
can do this really simply, is what I'm saying. I've done it stupidly complicated because that's what I am. But yeah, it can be done simply, and it's both much cheaper. And then, from a security perspective, people can't do anything with it.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just
nothing to
HTML.
go at. Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. And all the forms and all of that kind of stuff you take care of with what, a third party, or it's...
So Netlify itself has a forms API and so basically you just put in some custom data in the HTML for the form.
Got it.
And it will post it. And on their free plan, you get like 100 entries to your form. Afterwards, you might have to pay.
Okay.
100 people don't email me.
That's
Please,
right.
100 people don't email me. I don't need emails.
Yeah. I love it when you see all these, you can get 500,000 page views a month or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay.
Well, that's exactly the scenario I didn't want to be in. As someone who is very technical, my choices really were manage the stack myself or have somebody else do it for me. I don't want somebody else to do it for me. I have my own opinions, and they're very opinionated on what I want out of things. And so this was the solution that I came up with to make it as simple as possible to get something done. And this way I'm not faffing about, and I don't have to worry about doing server updates every day and managing stuff and deploying stuff and all this. When I want to write, I could just write a post and go, push the button.
Yeah.
And it's done.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So as somebody who doesn't struggle with imposter syndrome, that does get challenged when I'm on WP Builds and almost every conversation we have is technical and I'm here with Tim Nash. Just saying.
You're not going to hate the next story.
Well, I've got to side with you, Michelle. A lot of this stuff is often totally beyond my pay grade, and sometimes it's nice to... Yeah, sometimes it's nice to read it and kind of try to figure your way through the woods, and other times you get halfway through and you go, I don't get this at all. I have no idea, but it's nice
Tim's
to hear
talking
other people
about the servers and everything, and I'm like, well, look at the Wapoo.
But we all,
my confidence intact, it'll be a good day.
We all have a place, don't we? That's the nice thing about this community. Absolutely. So, yeah, speaking of which, we're on to another area of Tim's strength again. So, Michelle and I, what we'll do is we'll just walk off the screen, go and make a coffee, just read the paper a bit.
Right? There we go.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But no, this stuff, to be honest with you, I am really interested in internet security. And I said before we hit the record button, I'm really interested in it from the narrative side. I really like reading about vulnerabilities and things that have gone wrong and people trying to patch it. It's when the technical details start to drop in that I kind of, it's not that I lose interest. I can't keep up. I just don't have the technical background or capability to keep up. But I'm really interested in internet security, probably more than anything else, actually. I just really like the stories, and I like all the people who are this sort of dynamic of people fighting on one hand and people trying to defend us on the other hand. And it's really adversarial. And I just love the ingenuity and the things that the hackers are up to. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the boundaries that they're pushing all the time to make the people, the good guys, if you like, have to do the work to keep them out. And it's just fascinating, not necessarily just on the WordPress side, just the internet in general, your iPhone and your computer and all that kind of stuff. So
I will say that security is the number one reason that all of my sites have been moved to managed WordPress hosting.
Right.
So that I don't have to spend so much time worrying about being hacked, because I did get hacked once. 3 times over the same weekend, and I had everything sitting on a shared server, and it took me hours and hours and hours because I didn't know how to clean up the sites, and I didn't have the money to pay somebody at the time. I was freelance. And so, looking at managed, it's people that balk at the price. It's like insurance for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do like to listen to Tim talk on and on about it because it is fascinating. I don't mean to say that in that way. It is fascinating. I didn't say drone on and on. I said talk.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating. And I'm just so grateful that people like Tim exist and that people at managed WordPress hosting companies take care of this for me so that I can just sip my coffee while Tim talks about this.
Yeah, I remember I was skiing. This is going years ago. I was skiing, and I'd been several times, and I'd been trying really hard to be good at skiing. I was giving it my full attention. Every single thing was every sinew of my body, and then this what looked like a 9-month-old child just went straight past me and just did some cool turns and all this. Tiny little child, and I just thought, do you know what? I'm just not built to be good at some things. It's just
their center of gravity is lower. It's easier for them.
Right, yeah. And I think that's the way of the world. You can't be good at everything. We've all got our skills. And speaking of which, turns out that there's a lot of people out there who have great skills hacking websites and creating a fuss for the rest of us with malware and viruses and all this kind of stuff. WordPress, it feels like, has got a massive target painted on its back just because of the volume of websites that are built on top of it. And WordFence, big company in this space, often put out articles. This one is nothing to do with a particular vulnerability, and they're the ones we normally mention. This one's just about the sort of cat and mouse game, really, if you like, of people trying to hide their malware and make it look as benign as possible. In fact, make it look to the untrained eye like me. If I looked at the stuff that they're mentioning in this article, I would just pass it by. Just curious what Tim's thoughts are on this. The article is called WordPress Malware Camouflaged as Code. And just, I wish these people didn't exist, but I'm also quite grateful they are, because it gives me some sort of thing to hook onto each week. So, yeah. Tim, go for it. The floor is yours.
Am I allowed to pimp somebody else's podcast?
Of course.
If you like security and you like security narratives, Darknet Diaries.
That is so good.
It is a very good podcast.
It is real. I was listening to that just yesterday, in fact. It's a beautiful podcast, yeah.
Unfortunately, life is not like Darknet Diaries or the views that you said. My life is basically an Excel spreadsheet most of the time, and write bits. It's nowhere near as fun as you'd think. But speaking, the article's all about this idea of how bad actors are now are trying to hide their code. Now, the one thing you find with hacked code is most people, if a person looks at if somebody knows the site's been hacked, someone goes and starts looking for the code and they open up a file, you can normally tell which file's been hacked by the fact that there's this dirty great block of unformatted gumph that makes no sense. And that was because the bad actor was trying to avoid any automated scans looking for them by obfuscating the code and hiding it and coding it and then trying to decode it later down. The result of this is it looks ugly, and humans go, it's that. So whereas computers can't really detect what we perceive as ugly code or the big blocks of code as easily, humans are really good at reading through files and going, that's the hacked code. So over time, there's this sort of half and half scenario where if they'd left that code unobfuscated, then someone's antivirus software would have picked it up. By obfuscating it, the antivirus software is less likely to pick it up, but a human's more likely to put it up. Now we're getting into a scenario where the bad actors are sort of trying to work out where the halfway house is, where they can not end up with these giant bits of code, but have bits of code that look like the same as everything else. I came across this a few years ago where I was reading through, I knew a site had been hacked, and I was reading through this code, and I glanced down this file and I looked through it, and I was like, I can't find this hack. It's not in this file. And I went back several times. I went and looked at the file again. And then I realized that where the hack was, because it was actually a function, and it clearly said in the comment, which they'd written in the same style as the rest of the file, this is where we're sending the payload of data to credit card data to the company, with the URL of where it was going. And it was completed full, unobfuscated. And I skipped it about 5 times.
Right.
Because I was looking for a big block of horrible code. I wasn't looking for, here's the function. Beautifully commented. I learned a lot about how they were doing stuff.
Very kind.
They were really nice to me, but I wouldn't have, as a person who was glancing, I didn't spot that. And actually, the automated virus checks weren't spotting it either, and because it just looked like sensible, normal code. Now, the WordPress article is actually talking about where they're not doing it quite as blatant as that, but they're making functions and look as if they should be doing something when they're really doing something else, and then pulling in extra data. And one of the things that they do right at the end that's quite clever that you find an awful lot on is that they get their data from a PNG file. Now you're thinking, hang on a minute, PNG is a picture. But most people don't realize that you can just shove extra data into files like PNGs or JPEGs. So you can throw in PHP code into that file. You could still load the file up and it will still be a picture. But halfway down, there's just a bunch of PHP code. Now, if you went to a server and typed in, I don't know, myexample.com/mypng, it would still show you the picture and it wouldn't execute that PHP code. But if you had some other code on the site and said, hey, execute the code that's in this file, then PHP is pretty good as a parser and goes, okay, there seems to be a load of gumph that I don't need to know about, i.e. the picture. But hey, there's this tag here that says PHP, so I'll just process everything in between that. And it processes it through and passes it out. You'll be amazed how often you find PHP sitting in public uploaded images. So if you've got a website that you let the public upload an image to, there is a reasonable chance that you're going to open up some of those JPEGs and find that there is, in fact, some dodgy code sitting in there. Now, chances are that can't be exploited without another exploit in place as well.
Yep.
But it's just this article shows how you can just sort of layer these things in, along with hiding things really well.
So, go on. Sorry,
I was going to say, and the moral of this story is keep everything up to date, because when these vulnerabilities are found, if you're getting hacked, then you're getting hacked because your website isn't up to date. So, as unglamorous as it is, and you're seeing all the fun bits in the code, all of it is really irrelevant to your average user, and the average user should just update their website.
Yeah, keep everything up to date. Yeah. So in real world scenarios, crime and all of that kind of thing is often, there's a real obvious gain. Somebody burgles your house and they take a load of your stuff and it's got value, and that kind of thing. I'm never. There's no bit of me which doesn't always get amazed why these, and I know it's done by robots, and I know it's not individually picking out particular websites, but just curious what your thoughts are. What is the benefit typically for this stuff to be put out there? What are they trying to do? Are they like putting Bitcoin miners on your server, or are they trying to just lock your content up so that you pay them a ransomware? What's the current meaning of it all?
It really depends.
Yeah.
Good old-fashioned sending you Viagra spam is still very highly popular.
Really? Okay.
So you're just using your server to send out as much spam as possible.
Okay.
Directing traffic around, so taking your site over so that they can then use your site to push traffic to a different site, whether that's to boost SEO rankings, whether that is to do a direct denial of service attack on other people's sites. Ransomware is fairly low down the list on when hitting websites. That's more about hitting web servers. So if you can take the whole and infrastructure, if you can take the whole infrastructure out, if you take a website and just say, haha, we've changed all your files, then what tends to happen is the person goes, haha, I have a backup.
Yeah.
It's a bit harder when they go, haha, I've taken over your entire server, and you go, I can't actually get into it to put the backup on. That's a bit more awkward. So but yeah, so for websites themselves, ransomware is less, though ransomware of your host is a huge potential issue. And we're seeing more and more hosts being hit with ransomware. So, but I'm afraid, Bitcoining, mining is a common one. The lols is still actually relatively high up on the system. But quite a lot of these people, actually, what they do is they will put a backdoor onto your site. So a backdoor is just another way to get in. So once they've put the first vulnerability in, they'll create a second or even a third one. And then they'll just sell access.
Right.
And you can normally see when a site's been popped and sold, because when you go through the logs, you can I can see the initial entry point there, and then woof, all of these people suddenly logging in. And because weirdly, criminals don't really work in exclusivity. I'm sure they tell them that it's exclusive, but within a few minutes, it's like, yep, they just sell it as much access as they can. So the people who are doing the initial getting the things onto your server are normally selling, and they don't care what the other person's doing after that.
Yeah, it does feel to me like this is really the wrong word for it, but it does feel like if you are into internet security and you want to go down the dark side way of doing things, that there is there is actually a career in that, isn't there? You can genuinely make decent money if you're good at it, which is such a darn shame.
You can make decent money if you crap at it. That's the real
Oh,
problem.
really? Oh,
you
okay.
can buy these scripts for pennies. If you're in the right place, you can be getting this. You can gain access for pennies. You can get enough. You can make enough that you can make a good living while being absolutely rubbish and not having much technical nous at all.
I guess.
If you can use a Tor browser, you probably have enough nous to make money, which just sounds like a terrible. Don't do it as a career move, please.
Yeah, we're selling it. Yeah. No,
I was going over all the forms in my head that I have that allow you to upload images, and every single one of them requires that you pay me some form of money, so sponsorships or that kind of thing. So if they want to upload images that have that, they're gonna have to pay me to do it.
Nicely done, Michelle. That's a good way of getting around it. I suspect that if that's the case, it's quite unlikely that somebody's going to pay you to upload a nefarious image. Yeah, that's a good way of getting around it. Yeah, just fascinating. I'm always fascinated by this, the back and forth, and the fact that it affects all of our lives. And it increasingly, funnily enough, I was trying to book a badminton court earlier. This has got nothing to do with WordPress, but I was confronted by the fact that I couldn't book the badminton court unless I was using an app. You literally can't book the leisure centre facility now, which you have to book now because of COVID and all that. And you have to have the app. They won't do it over the phone. And I was just suddenly presented with the fact that, good grief, if you're really not into technology but this is the way you've got to do it. We're forcing everybody into using technology for everything. Mm-hmm. And we're opening all this stuff wide open. I would imagine that if my parents, for example, had to do this sort of stuff, they would probably have a laptop or something. It would be terribly out of date because they've got no interest in updating it. And I just worry about the future. So many people putting horrible stuff out there. Anyway, there you go.
I had to teach my parents how to use Uber, and it was not fun.
Oh, what you mean, like hailing a cab on the app? Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I suspect that for the likes of you, there was no impediment to doing that the very first time. I bet you downloaded Uber, the app, the first time, and within seconds you'd figured out how to do it. But honestly, if I gave that to my people in my life, let's say that, it would be impenetrable. They wouldn't be able to get past the...
Let's just say I ended up ordering a cab from my location to their location. Like, I basically had them pick up and do it from my phone because they just could not understand the concept.
Yeah. That's so weird. Yeah. Okay. Technology is everywhere. Okay. Let's press on. We've gone through the regular smorgasbord of stuff that I picked out for this week, and we're going to go on to a bit of content which has been given us by Michelle this week. Mm-hmm. First one, let me put the screen back on. Now, I confess, I haven't had a chance to read this, Michelle, so it very much is over to you. We're looking at a piece called Women in Technology, Hazel Quimpo. Why is this on our screens?
This is our screen. So one of the things that I love about Liquid Web is that they highlight women in technology that work within the Liquid Web company and brands. And I was just... Oh, there's Hazel. She says hi. I said it like, come watch us. So Hazel is one of those people that I get to work with, and we knew each other just through Twitter prior to this. But Hazel is just absolutely delightful. She knows her stuff, and when we get together in the same room, the ideas that generate back and forth and the synergy is just amazing. And I assume that because of the kind of person she is, she has that with a lot of people. So when you put into the show notes, are there any articles that you want to post, point people to what's relevant in your world right now? This just landed on the blog last Friday, and I absolutely wanted to take the opportunity to highlight Hazel.
Oh, I bet Hazel isn't quite as isn't the same color as this right now. I bet Hazel's a sort of slightly redder color.
But look, she and I have the same hair color.
Oh yes, look at that. Yeah. Oh well, that's nice. So is this particular blog feature? Is this a bit like Hero Press, where they just pick out people from their own company and tell you why they are such remarkable people?
It's a little bit more than that. It's a specific, they highlight a specific woman every month, and they assign a writer, and the writer interviews you and then puts together this piece that makes you sound amazing and highlights all of the things that you do. And when you get to read about these other women who are making great strides, and one of the questions when you get a chance to look at it, one of the questions is, what do we think of as the future of women in technology? And I love going back through this part of the blog and looking what other women see as the future of women in technology, and the bright hope that there is, and the legacy that we hope to leave for other women to have an easier path into different technological careers than we have sometimes had to fight to get to where we are. And so it's just wonderful. And being able to work with women like Hazel, it just absolutely, people asked me all the time, and they still do, when GiveWP was acquired, how has it been? Has it been okay? Because everybody worries that it's a takeover kind of thing. And it has been nothing but joyful, because I still get to do exactly what I do with GiveWP, but now I'm within a larger organization that puts me in touch with people like Hazel on a regular basis. And this is just, talk about a perk.
Yeah, that is nice. Unfortunately, my little... Oh, no, maybe it'll work. Maybe I have to click that one. Oh, there we go. There we go. I can make it appear. Look. Oh, shocks. Michelle knows how to make a gal feel special. Agree. LW is all sorts of fantastic. LW Liquid Web, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we spoke about that, didn't we, at the time? And there was all sorts of incredibly bizarre, unexpected, from my point of view, benefits that you accrued through the acquisition, and it sounds like it's all working out really well for you. That's lovely.
It is, absolutely.
You put 2 pieces forward for us, didn't you?
I
You
did.
put another one, which is more on your home territory, if you like, the give side of things.
Is.
Tell us about this.
The last time I was here, I got to talk about that we have text to give now with GiveWP, and we have people who are using text to give, which is wonderful. And there's lots of opportunities within a nonprofit organization to use that, specifically if you're having an event and people can't just like whip out and go to a website. Now they can use the text to give. But peer-to-peer fundraising is coming very soon. It's in the final stages of testing. We're going to see it very quickly. But what it does is it allows you to have people create donation forms on behalf of your organization within your organization. So think of it like a little bit of like the WordPress and Give meets I can't think of the word, the main fundraising
Just
thing right
giving?
now. But yeah, something like that, right? So like, let's say that you are running you're putting together a 5K, and you have and Nathan wants to run, and he wants to raise money for your 5K. Nathan can go to your website, spin up a donation form on your website to raise money for that 5K under his name.
Oh, so I can sort of proxy the fundraising for you. So I can just autonomously fundraise for something that you're doing without your permission. Even I could just say, I just want to give you a head start. That's cool.
You will have to. There's permissions in the back end, right? So you can spin up but somebody on the admin side will have to say, yes, we approve this form to go up on our website, because you want to make sure the language is proper and all of those kinds of things. So you still want to have some levels of control, but it's really going to make things easier. So we saw with the last WordFest that we did peer fundraising. So I had 24 days of artwork, and I raised over with Jessica Frick. We raised over $500 during 24 days for WordFest, and that was done with GiveWP, but using Gravity Forms to kind of pull it all together and then house it on the site. This is going to be without having to use a third party like Gravity Forms or Ninja Forms to be able to do that. So it's going to be its own plugin. It's going to work seamlessly with GiveWP, and it's going to make that. People are constantly asking us, we're having a golf tournament. People want to be able to put together their foursome, raise the money. We're having a chili cook-off, and we want to make sure people want to be able to create and have it not having to submit and have somebody create the form on the back end is just going to make life so much easier for all these nonprofits who want to be able to do that peer-to-peer fundraising like that.
That's really cool. Can I just say that you said something which I've heard in films so many times. You said chili cook-off. Folks over this side of the Atlantic, we have no idea what that means. What is a chili cook-off?
Do you have like bread pudding cook-offs or something? I mean, like Yorkshire pudding cook-offs? I don't know.
I don't think we do. Do we? Tim? Do we have those?
No, we do things like the largest carrot and
Yeah, just a simple,
We have
straight up
those
large
too.
carrot. Keep it easy.
No,
Yeah.
So a chili cook-off, let's say we have fairs and things like that here, right? And so a chili cook-off would be everybody creates their own version of what chili is to them.
Okay.
And then you have testers, so you have judges that'll go through and they'll taste every single one and proclaim that one is the best.
Oh, I think we've stolen that idea and created a show called The Great British Bake Off, where
I believe you have, yeah.
people create cakes, and then there's
Mhm.
a great deal of gnashing of clothes and rending of teeth,
I
or
I
the other
may
way
have
around,
watched a few
probably.
episodes
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
that.
Yeah. So it's a thing. It's a thing on this side of the
It
Atlantic as
is.
well.
Okay, very
Okay, that looks really cool. Yeah, really,
Mhm.
really nice. Obviously, my sort of slightly foot in mouth moment earlier, where I said, "Yeah, anybody can raise money for anybody." Yeah, I guess you've got to give permission, otherwise you might you might have people that you really don't want raising money for you, which could be a bit awkward.
Or they might misspell your organization's name. So there's some controls on the back end to be able to fix things like that, add featured images if they don't put an image in, things like that. So you'll still have complete control over what's on your website, but it allows other people to do the spin up for you so that you don't have to go through and have conversations with people, and it doesn't have to be complex.
Right, a couple of extra things. The first one I don't have a screenshot for, so I'm just going to pull the screen off. Michelle, you just wanted to mention. I think I might do it, and if there's any need to say any more, we can add that in. But Michelle wanted to mention that the WordCamp US dates have been announced. It's October the 1st, the upcoming October. It's not, like 2022. And I think they're at the point where they're looking for speakers. Is that right? If you go to the website?
Nope.
Yeah.
The deadline has passed on that now.
Oh,
So
darn.
because it's coming up so quickly, right? So we're building this whole thing in 8 weeks, basically.
Okay.
And now we're down to like about 6 weeks of it.
So you're involved in that one, are you, as well?
I'm one of the organizers for WordCamp US, yes.
So go and check the website out. Sorry, I don't have a URL.
Tickets are available now. That's okay. Tickets
Great.
are available now. So
thank you.
And don't overspend your budget.
Yeah, not by $300.
Otherwise, Automattic will be very upset with you.
Yeah, I wonder
£300 off you.
I wonder what the point of the constraint moment is. Like, is $27 all right? What about 38 or 92? Maybe.
I will tell you that sponsorship sold out within a few hours.
Oh, so good.
Yes.
Well done. Well done. Hey, speaking of which, that was a nice segue. Never get that normally. I'm just going to plug something I'm doing. We're doing this Page Builder Summit thing again. We're on version 3, and if anybody wants to help us out with sponsorship to make it happen, basically, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me at admin@pagebuildersummit.com, and it's happening in October this year. So it will, nicely just collide probably with WordCamp US. So it looks like, Michelle, we're going to be running dry because you've got them all already. But if you are interested, Page Builder Summit version 3, we're doing it a little bit later than WordCamp US. I think it's a week or 10 days or so later. But if you're interested in sponsorship, reach out, admin@pagebuildersummit.com. In our show notes, Tim didn't add anything, but I'm going to open the floor to him, and he can just decline and say, no, I got nothing. But Tim, if there's anything you want to mention that you're doing this week, this month, something that you want to plug, feel free, go for it.
No, I'm on holiday.
Oh, nice. They're the best things. In that case, I will say one thing, which I want to get your two's opinion on. I'm thinking of buying a standing desk. Discuss. Is that a good idea, or is that just stupidity? I want to get one of those desks that moves up and down. You know the kind? You ever done that? You ever done the standing desk thing?
So I have
somebody who has. Go ahead.
I was going to say I have a version of this. It's called boxes.
Right. So you just literally put boxes on top of the table until it's higher. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I did think about boxes, and I did, because my table is kind of like basically hardwired into my room. It's one of those kind of pre-fitted things, and I can't really do much about it. And then I saw this thing that you can plonk. It's a Kickstarter thing, so it's a bit of a posh box, and it comes in like 3 flat pack things, and together they make this sort of A-frame, and things can stand on it. But I just thought, you know what? I sit in this chair too long, and you've probably all seen my chair. My chair is not the kind of chair that anybody ought to be sitting in. It's it's this. Look, there it is.
It's just a kitchen chair.
It's a good chair, that. I love it. And I was thinking I need to stand more, and it would be a bit like me putting on a few laps of the circuit each day just by standing around.
I would say maybe a chair is an improvement over a desk.
No, this is the chair. This is the chair which works. Honestly, I've had this conversation. There is a nice chair. Like, I've just touched it. There it is. And I hate it. It makes my back hurt. This beauty it's just sitting this all day. And apart from the occasional shuffle where I just have to sort of realign things, I'm
you can't
golden.
have that posture in that chair. That's why. You have to
it's just the perfect. But I feel like, even though I've got this nice chair that I like, I feel like I see people talking about getting a standing desk, and I think actually that would be good for me. Just being on my feet all day might be a good thing. Not for everybody, right? But
I need the opposite. I need the opposite. So I understand the opposite is technically what I already have, but I need one that lowers from where I am.
What do you mean?
For 2 reasons. Well, number one, I have mobility issues, so I can't stand for long periods of time. So a standing desk does nothing for me. But I'm only 5 feet tall. And so in order to reach the desk at the right height for my hands, my feet dangle. And so now I have to have a step, like a stool under the desk to put my feet on. But if I move to the right or the left, then it's not under my feet anymore. So I'm constantly readjusting how I sit at a desk. If I sit comfortable with my feet flat on the floor, then my arms are too high for the keyboard. And so as somebody who's only 5 feet tall, I need short desks. Is there such a thing as, can I lower this desk by about 3 inches?
Yeah, because there isn't like the anti-box, is there? You can't it's a trough. You need like a little trough in the desk which you can put the monitor
when I worked at the massage school, my desk actually had it wasn't the kind of desk now where it just kind of sits on the ground, right? It had little feet underneath it. And so one of the maintenance people came in and cut the feet off for me.
Right.
So the desk was the perfect height. Now, after I left there, I don't know who got stuck with that desk because there probably wasn't anybody else 5 feet tall. But regardless, I was a happy camper for those couple of years.
Yeah, because most office furniture is kind of like pre-bought, isn't it? And I'm just looking at, like, for example, the table behind you. It's got the legs that it comes with, and that's the height. Where this I fitted, and it is the perfect height for me in this chair, which doesn't move. Everything works exactly right. I'm just conscious that I'm not spend like 8 to 10 hours a day sitting in this chair. I'm just thinking it would be a poor man's way of getting a little tiny bit of exercise. Heinrich says, get one, basically. He really recommends it. Best thing. And
Cameron said that too, I think.
Cameron also, I love it. Okay, that's it. Sold. I'm going to get some boxes.
Well, I was going to say, get some boxes first, because if you're using the boxes, that will let you feel it and test it.
Yep.
And then if it works, then buy it. Because the only thing I would say is they're an incredibly large investment to get a decent one. And you need to have one that has a good if you've got a heavy desk, you need a good motor. Otherwise, what happens is you either have a hand crankshaft, which that'll get you your exercise in, but only one arm will get grow. But if you want the one if you're after the thing that presses the button, and then you want one that goes to various presets and all the fancy stuff, you need they do come in quite expensive. So try with the boxes first.
Desktop versions, they have desktop versions where you can set it on top of your desk.
Yeah, like I was just saying, there's this A-frame one which I've seen, which I really like the look of. The only thing is I've got a fairly wide monitor, and I feel that like tapping on so I could mount that onto the wall, I guess, but then tapping on the desk as it is at the minute, I'm imagining that the minute vibration that I get amplified by the boxes or the stand, this thing's gonna be like watching I'll get all seasick.
You get seasick.
Yeah, really, first world problems. But I was just interested to know what you thought. And the only 2 comments we got about it are very favourable. And Tim's got his box, and so there we go. Oh, it sounds good. Thank you.
I want the opposite.
Yeah, yes, that's right. She wants the opposite. Yeah, you need a saw, basically.
IKEA.
They do.
IKEA desks. Nearly all of them have their sort of like raising and lowering stands, and their lowering one is really low. The only downside is that you also need a spirit level.
Oh.
Because otherwise, when you raise up your 4 legs and you're trying to even them up to the right height, they're going, yes, I've done it fine. And then you watch as your monitor
watch the coffee slowly go towards the really expensive MacBook Pro
all your
on the end of the desk.
Rolling everywhere.
Right, we really went off piece there, but it was very nice. Thank you very much for that. As always, we do this 2 p.m. UK time every Monday. We'll be back here next week, hopefully joined by Paul Lacey. But for this week, we've done it. We're going to knock it on the head. I'd obviously like to thank both Michelle and Tim for joining us this week. We, on this new platform, we don't have to do the awkward wave because it just stops it straight away. But would you mind, for the sake of the album art, would you just give us a wave so that I can screenshot that last few seconds? That's perfect. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, guys.